On a quiet winter afternoon in January 1919, a wall of liquid sugar taller than a two-story building suddenly tore through the streets of Boston with the force of an exploding bomb, killing people where they stood, crushing buildings like paper, and leaving the city drowning in sweetness and death in what would become one of the strangest disasters in American history. For years, a massive steel tank had stood silently in Boston's North End, looming over crowded immigrant neighborhoods. It belonged to the United States Industrial Alcohol Company and held more than 2.3 million gallons of thick, dark molasses used to make industrial alcohol for explosives and ammunition during World War I. The tank was built quickly and cheaply in 1915 without proper engineering tests. Residents nearby often complained that it leaked so badly that children would run beneath it with cups to collect free molasses as it dripped from the seams. The owners simply painted the tank brown to hide the leaks. On January 15, 1919, the weather suddenly warmed after days of freezing cold, causing the molasses inside the tank to expand rapidly. Just after 12:40 p.m., with no warning, the tank burst apart with a thunderous roar that witnesses compared to machine gun fire. A wave of molasses traveling at nearly 35 miles per hour surged down Commercial Street. The sticky flood was 25 feet high and powerful enough to rip buildings from their foundations, flip railway cars, and snap steel beams. People had no time to run. Workers on lunch break, children playing in the street, horses pulling wagons, and residents in nearby homes were swallowed instantly. Some were crushed by debris, while others were trapped and drowned in molasses so thick they couldn't move. A nearby firehouse was knocked off its foundation and collapsed, killing several firefighters inside. The elevated railway tracks were torn apart, leaving twisted metal hanging in the air. Rescue efforts were unlike anything anyone had ever faced. Survivors were glued to the wreckage by hardened syrup. Rescuers had to wade through knee-deep molasses, every step a struggle, as the freezing air caused the sugar to thicken rapidly like cement. Horses had to be shot where they were stuck because they could not be freed. Doctors and nurses worked through the night in syrup-soaked clothing. The dead were so coated that some bodies were not identified for days. By the time the disaster ended, 21 people were dead and over 150 were injured. But the destruction was far from over. For weeks afterward, the neighborhood was buried under inches of sticky residue. The harbor water turned brown. The smell of molasses lingered in Boston for decades, and old residents later swore they could still catch a faint sweetness on hot summer days. At first, the company tried to blame anarchists, claiming a bomb had destroyed the tank during a time of political unrest after World War I. But the truth began to emerge during one of the largest civil lawsuits in American history. Over 100 victims sued the company, and after 6 years of investigation, engineers proved the tank had been poorly constructed from the beginning. The steel was too thin, rivets were defective, and basic safety testing had never been done. The company was found responsible and forced to pay millions in damages. The Great Molasses Flood changed American industry forever. It became a key legal case that helped establish corporate responsibility and stricter building safety standards across the country. Engineers began requiring stress testing, inspections, and accountability. What began as a sweet-smelling catastrophe rewrote the rules of industrial safety. Today, there is no tank where the disaster happened. A park now sits quietly at the site, with only a small historical marker to hint at the nightmare that once unfolded there. Tourists walk by unaware that a deadly tidal wave of molasses once turned that peaceful street into one of the most bizarre disaster zones America has ever known. And yet, beneath the city's pavement, the legend still whispers that on warm days, Boston still smells faintly of sugar and loss.